Thank you, Deirdre, and welcome. So it's 7:05, so we're going to get started. I am just going to share my screen with you all. Give me just one moment. So there we go. So the title of this talk, it's really funny because I had been scheduled to actually give this talk at the library in person. Um, and it was kind of, I guess, fortuitous that it was already on the schedule because I think now more than ever we need this. And I've just kind of just changed it a little bit from what I was originally going to do to address corona specific potential anxieties. Um, so welcome. My name is Dr. P. Dominique Paterano, and I am the founder and head coach of Crimson Coaching, which is a test prep, academic tutoring, and college consulting service. One of the many hats I wear, though, I'm also a yoga teacher. And so I integrate a lot of mindfulness practices when I work with students one on one, as well as when I teach small classes on study skills and time management, because it's not just my opinion, but a lot of teachers believe that this generation of children is really one of the most anxious that we've seen. I've been teaching since 1997, and I feel like the kids that I see today are way more anxious than the kids that I used to teach. So, why Crimson Coaching? I bring that up specifically in this workshop because crimson is the color of my alma mater, Harvard. And so I am a self professed recovering type A personality. And I do believe that it was yoga and meditation that in part helped me be not so anxious. And so it's really my wish that I would want to be able to share sort of some of what I've learned about being anxious with parents so that you can then help your children become less anxious. So tonight's agenda, I have this PowerPoint, but you should definitely feel free if you have any questions to throw them into the Q&A while I'm speaking. If I can toggle back and forth, I will, and if not, I definitely plan to have a Q&A as well at the end. And before we start, it seems like everybody's already familiar with that, but basically Zoom works best when one person is speaking at a time. So for now, that'll be me, but then I'm happy at the end if you want to unmute yourself and we can hear from everybody too. I'm really excited to do that. And before we start, I just want to give three big thank yous. First, to Ossining Public Library for sponsoring this talk. Second, to Susie Zavarella, who's on the call but muted and has no video, for kind of jumping on, diving full steam ahead into learning Zoom to enable this webinar to start. And lastly, to all of you for taking time out of your super busy schedules. And I know you're busy because if you're all parents, you're all homeschooling your kids now, basically, and you may be having a job outside the home as well. So thank you for coming tonight. So let's just talk a little bit about what anxiety looks like generally, and then also specifically in teens. You may see this in some of your children. They might be restless, irritable, easily fatigued. They might have difficulty concentrating and or sleeping. Those are kind of general symptoms of anxiety. What I also see in particular with middle and high school students that I work with is Anxiety also manifesting as avoidance of work and procrastination. A lot of times, what parents and teachers may think of as laziness is actually anxiety, and we'll talk about why or how some of that manifests as avoidance and procrastination. Um, and in extreme cases, students could have panic attacks, rapid heart rate, sweating, trouble breathing. Usually, unless the student's really bad, I only see these symptoms during high stakes testing like the SAT. But you can absolutely use a lot of the techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you to help your child even get over some of that. I worked with a child once who I was tutoring for the SAT, and she had, the sweaty palms, saw blotches, and we worked on breathing, we worked on journaling, and she got through the SAT, and she now graduated from University of Chicago. um, so why are teens so anxious? Perfectionism is a big reason, and I see perfectionism a lot in girls in particular, not exclusively. I don't want to have a gender bias, but I feel like 90% of the kids who I see who are perfectionistic are girls. And that, the desire to be absolutely perfect, of course, gives one a lot of anxiety. That's something that I myself used to struggle with. Then there's also social anxiety, which sometimes can be related to perfectionism. So, if somebody wants to be perfect because she believes that all of her peers are also perfect or more perfect than she is, there's that kind of competitive social element of it. But then there's also just other types of social anxiety, like, you know, um, inability to say talk to new kids or to make new friends, not wanting to join clubs or sports. These are all reasons why a child, may be anxious. And then, of course, there's college admissions, which is an overall source of anxiety any year. But I think, in particular, if any of you are parents of high school students who are sophomores, juniors, or seniors, this year is probably even more anxiety provoking than ever. And of course, one of the reasons that I believe that um, these are causes of anxiety are worse than ever is because all of this is exacerbated by social media. Whereas when most of us went to school, we would get off the school bus and maybe not see our friends until the next day. Of course, now kids are connected 24/7 with all of their peer group, and fear of missing out and other comparison of grades is only going to be exacerbated by that. Um, oops. So coronavirus, of course, has given a lot of us adults anxiety, but this is only heightened for teens. I just spoke to a girl that I'm coaching this morning on time management, and she's falls into this perfectionistic cycle, so she avoids work. And she said to me, I'm just so stressed out. And I said, well, why? What's going on? And she's like, well, some teachers I don't hear from at all. And then others I hear from way too much. And none of them really seems like they know what's going on. And so I sat back and I thought, yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen to some of us, to our jobs, our businesses, but we have the kind of adult skills and life experience usually to weather those storms. But when you're 13, this fear of the unknown is profoundly unsettling. And just the whole lack of a routine, structures give the human brain a lot of comfort. And now, when we lose those structures and the adult presence in a child's life may be profoundly uneven, that is very unsettling for them. Um, And I think for the older children, there's this lingering fear of how can I be perfect and get into college and measure up against my peers when, for instance, in one high school where I do a lot of tutoring, they took grades away. And so now grades are all pass fail, which was done in order to take the burden off a lot of the lower performing kids who might struggle with distance learning. Those top performing kids are stressing out because they say, how is this going to impact my GPA? How can I show a college that I'm really the top of the class? And so a lot of what's going on now is only exacerbating, is only worse because of the coronavirus. So, what are some ways that we can address teens' anxiety? I teach a course on this at the Center for Continuing Ed in Mamaroneck, and I love Dr. Dan Siegel's Healthy Mind Platter as a really useful way. So, I'm giving him full credit. This is not my idea. Dan Siegel is a neuropsychiatrist who teaches at UCLA, and he has come up with these 7 essentials for creating healthy minds. And I am going to just tweak it and add a couple of my own things in there. So, the biggest thing that I see across the board before coronavirus, during, and probably after is that teens are not getting enough sleep. They all need between 8 and it's actually not 10. It's actually younger teens need as many as 11 hours sleep. 9.25 or 9.25 hours is the average amount of hours that a teen needs. And so I advise counting backwards. So figure out when the child needs to be waking up. And of course, during school, that's predetermined by the school time. Now, I think, though, you should still be determining a set time. Maybe it's 8 o'clock, maybe it's 8:30, but you should have your child know what that time is, and you want to choose that together, and then count backwards for that when the child should go to bed. The bedroom, and this is good sleep hygiene for any of us, should be cool, dark. Sometimes if you live, say, in the city or next to a bright light, you might want to get some um, light canceling drapes. No TV and no phone. A lot of students are on their phone until, I've heard, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's no wonder why they're exhausted for first period. If your child isn't able to use the phone responsibly, I wholeheartedly recommend taking the phone away and just investing in a good old fashioned alarm clock to get them up out of bed. A new kind of technique that's being discussed is weighted blankets. They kind of have the same effect as swaddling does on infants. And so this is kind of a newer thing that's been discussed. Avoiding any screens, even those that have the kind of blue light decreasing and orange light increasing as we get closer to nighttime. You really want to cut off all screen use at least an hour before bedtime and encourage the child to read or listen to music instead. And then if the child really needs to nap, keep it to under 30 minutes and hopefully before 3 p.m. so that it doesn't completely throw off bedtime later. So, physical activity, another really important thing that's linked to sleep. So, sometimes teens, because their circadian rhythms or their daily rhythms are very different than ours, they come awake at, say, 8 o'clock at night. But we really want to try to encourage them to exercise much more early than that, because that's only going to wake them up. And both the better sleep and the physical activity, of course, will help them to be able to fall asleep. And some of this, the physical activity can really overlap with fun time, downtime, and even now social time. And students might consider even chatting on the phone. I do this. I walk 3 miles a day and I chat with friends on the phone while I walk. And I really recommend, especially now that we're all really going out of the house a lot less to the extent possible. If some of this fun time, downtime, physical activity can take place in nature or at least outside, the time in nature has also been shown to have anxiety reducing benefits. So Dr. Dan Siegel's Healthy Mind Platter does not have food on it, but there are also some foods that help tame anxiety. Anything that's antioxidant rich tends to calm the sympathetic nervous system. Magnesium rich fruits and vegetables and nuts. Zinc rich food, including beef, cashews, egg yolks, anything that has omega 3s like salmon and probiotics. All of those are proven to really calm the sympathetic nervous system that makes us very anxious. And of course, complex carbohydrates will not spike that blood sugar and it kind of keep that blood sugar at an even keel all day long, which also can help tame anxiety. And some students, especially in high school, do already drink caffeine, and so we want to try to limit that as well. Or if their anxiety is really bad, you may want to cut them off caffeine altogether. So the next part of the healthy mind platter that Dr. Dan recommends is that we all need focus time. And this is generally for adults' work and for students' schoolwork. And this is really the piece of the healthy mind platter that is most problematic for a lot of kids, especially now during distance learning. So, I have a whole other talk on time management, and I'm happy to give that at some point, but a lot of those techniques are kind of beyond the scope of this talk. I will just say, though, that helping kids to recognize what their own goals are so that they can be intrinsically motivated, meaning that their motivation comes from them and not from you or a teacher, which would be an extrinsic motivation, is really key to helping them plan their own time. If you're interested, I have a free ebook on goal setting on my website at www.crimsoncoaching.com, and you can feel free to download that. It's really short and it's got a whole template. It's almost like a little workbook where they can fill in their goals and then also develop their own action plan to achieve those goals. And when they begin to see the connection between their goals and how they're spending their time on a daily basis, that's really when they're going that's when the anxiety is going to ratchet down. Because when students fritter away their time and their work piles up because they're not handing in assignments, those kids who procrastinate are actually profoundly anxious because they know they have all this work that needs to be handed in. And they now, feel like there's this mountain that needs to be climbed in order to get it all in. And so, in order to avoid that, figuring out how to spend their time is kind of the key to that. And having it come from them is really the most, I think, successful way to do it. Um, so, on a practical level, I would say, once you figure out how many hours of sleep they need and what their bedtime is, have them set an alarm every day for waking up at the same time. For students in high school, you should not be their alarm clock. They should be getting up on their own. And I know that's easier for me to say than to do. But again, try to link it to those goals for them. The next thing they should do is, if all their assignments are on Google Classroom or whatever learning platform their school uses, or if their teachers are just emailing it to them, wherever it is, the first thing they should do after eating breakfast in the morning is make a schedule for the day. And this is really key. They shouldn't just be listing out their assignments. That's great. But if they only list their assignments and don't have a start time and an end time, then it's very easy to watch, as one of my students did, 4 episodes of Grey's Anatomy, and then the afternoon's over, right? Um, so listing their assignments could be first. They might want to estimate how long it takes them to do each assignment, and then they should write a schedule. I recommend doing the most difficult thing first, although if they have a lot of overdue work, they might just want to start with the things that are due today and then work on later on the things that were due yesterday and last week. They also, if there's missing work, could try to do that on the weekend for an hour or two. So I kind of compiled connecting time, downtime, and playtime. They're all really similar, of course, but distinct. Connecting time is social time. Downtime is, going to vary by kids. Some kids will like to go shoot hoops in your driveway. Other kids are going to want to listen to music. And playtime might be something like, um, playing a game with the family. The reason I put them together is because many times these can be done all together, or they are overlapping. It's really important for parents to acknowledge teens' developmental needs now as well as before coronavirus. Teens, it's normal for them to want to spend more time with their friends and less time with you. And I realize this makes dealing with social isolation and being at home quarantined even more difficult. But I think if you can start with, say, okay, this is normal that my kid wants to have nothing to do with me, then it maybe takes some of the anger or frustration out of that equation. Um, I think we also need to be more lenient because that need, it's a psychological need that teens have to identify more strongly with a peer group during adolescence, that needs to be met more than ever online now. And I think to allow that to happen, maybe even more than you maybe used to, could be key to your child maintaining a healthy child and taming their anxiety. In terms of downtime and playtime on the daily schedule, all students need a break from work. I don't suggest that a student should work from 9 to 3 with no breaks. That would be crazy. However, it's really important, and I tell this to the students that I coach, that if you're going to take a downtime break or a playtime break, that you schedule that in with a start time and an end time. Because if you don't, it's very easy to make downtime and playtime, be 5 hours, and then focus time or work time gets to be like this. Um, I do suggest that unless your teen has to work with other people for a school project, that the connecting time, that social time, be kept off the schedule, the daily schedule during school hours, like, 9 to 4 or 8 to 3, until their work is all done. That should really be a reward, that social time. And I don't think texting with friends during the day is going to be helpful. I also want to just encourage you to consider that, especially for older teens, maybe 15, 16, 17, that they may need some alone time, even in the house. And so perhaps the mom and dad want to go out for a drive for an hour, or you guys want to go out for a walk by yourself. I think it's completely natural for the teen to have had some alone time before, and they may be missing that now. So these are all ways that the teen needs to connect with their peers, but maybe needs to withdraw a little bit from the family. The last time in Dr. Dan Siegel's Healthy Mind Platter is time in. And this is the thing that always gives students the most kind of um, trouble or confusion, because I think it's kind of amorphous. So I actually just copied and pasted this right from his website. And the definition of time in is when we reflect quietly, internally, focusing on sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts, we help to better integrate the brain. And by integrating the brain, he means like integrating social things that happen to us, emotions, as well as learning that might take place, all of those things. We need that time in order to have a fully integrated brain, and one that's not riddled by anxiety. So what are some examples? Well, meditation is great. Some people might like journaling. I also should have put painting or any kind of art. That helps a lot of people. Spiritual people might choose prayer, or even examples of conscious breathing often help to focus on those sensations and allow people to kind of focus on their thoughts. Um, so we can try some breathing now. It's a little weird. I have to admit, I've never taught conscious breathing where everybody can see me, but I can't see you or hear you. Um, but I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to teach you some techniques that maybe you can teach your kids. Two different ones I'm going to do. I often tell students that they're both really good to practice before bed, because especially if you're going to try to get your child to go to bed earlier, in the beginning, they're going to be anxious because they're not going to be tired originally at, like, say, if they're going to bed at 1 a.m. now, they're not going to be tired at 11. So trying to get them to do some of these could be really great. And for teens that suffer from test anxiety specifically, I have a recording on the resources page of my website that they can download. Um, so what we'll try now, the first one is progressive muscle relaxation. And basically what it is just I'm going to ask you to tense and then relax different parts of your body from the tips of your toes all the way up to your head. And that helps bring about a greater sense of ease in the body. So if you'd like, I invite you now to just join with me in a chair. Probably helps if you try to sit up nice and straight, like rather than sitting back in the chair slouching. I'm going to sit up nice and straight, and let's just curl our toes and release. And now point your toes up to the ceiling and release. Now pick your heels up and tighten your calves and release. Tighten your thighs and release. Now scrunch your butt and release. Contract your abdomen and release. Now make your hands into fists and release. Now make muscles like Popeye and release. Now make fists and straighten your arms and bring them down to the ground, point them towards the floor and release. Now shrug your shoulders up to your ears and release. And now make a face like you just ate a lemon and release. And now try to scrunch everything all at one time. Scrunch, 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 and release. So that one's a really good one to start because it doesn't require much, you're moving throughout the body, so it's not as still as the next one. And that's a really good one to just initiate the process. And then if you want to try another breathing, specifically a breathing exercise, let's do that one now. Again, I encourage you to sit up nice and tall. Imagine that there's like a little golden string going from the tip of your head all the way up to the sky, so that your chest is nice and open. And I invite you to put your hands on your belly. And rather than thinking about breathing into your chest up here, I want you to think about breathing into your belly, so that your belly hangs open on the inhale and then draws back to your spine on the exhale. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes. You don't need to. And just, I'd like you to just pay attention to your breath. Notice the air coming into your nostrils, and notice that flowing air out of your nostrils. Notice as we begin to quiet our minds, the breath slows down a little bit. And now, as you notice your inhale, your belly rises open. You might feel your hands if your hands are on your belly. And as you exhale, that belly contracts back towards the spine. One more time. And now we're just going to do what we call a 4-count breath. So we will inhale for 4 and exhale for 4. Ready? Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, notice your belly rise. Exhale, notice your belly contract. Try this 2 more times at your own pace. Good. And when you're all done, if you're ready, you can open up your eyes and just take a moment, check in with yourself, and think about the well being that you feel right now. And it's so easy. I've done this with hundreds of teenagers, and they can do it too. And so you might want to think about trying to do that, maybe even before you all go to bed. One app that I really recommend that can help you if you're worried that you might not be able to do this on your own is Insight Timer. There's a free version that I use. There are also paid courses, but there are literally tens of thousands of free meditations on there that you don't even need the paid version. And you can get the reason it's called Insight Timer is because it started out just as a meditation timer. So it'd just be chanting or water sounds in the back and a little gong when the time you set was over. But now they also have guided meditations. So just like I kind of guided you through that breathing exercise and the progressive muscle relaxation, you can get much more experienced meditation teachers than me. I mean, people who are really famous are on there, and it's just a wonderful resource. So I invite all of you to try that as well. So sometimes these methods are not enough, and I'm as a yoga teacher and somebody who believes in trying to do, kind of the least possible and then go up from there. What else can you do? Um, I have a link to a Harvard Health Newsletter article on my website in the stress reduction tab. It's all the way down at the bottom, and you click a button. So I definitely recommend reading that, and that's where I get some of these exercises or some of these suggestions on this slide from. So the first kind of tip there is approach, don't avoid. And that's both from a work perspective and a social perspective. So, especially if your child is younger, when coronavirus is all done, encourage them to approach that new friend on the playground, to make that new friend, or to approach a teacher to help getting help with work, so that avoidance becomes less of a strategy for them. You may also practice exposure. So, for example, if a child doesn't like public speaking, you may ask that he or she makes the order at a restaurant when restaurants finally open, when a restaurant finally opens, for the whole family, and then have the child progressively try to do scarier and scarier things so that the exposure is really helping them get over that fear. um, the stress tolerance seems a little bit more aggressive for me. So, for example, anxiety is that a fight or flight response that we have. And so our bodies get ready, evolutionarily speaking, to fight the saber-toothed tiger or run away from it. And so it's charged with more blood coursing through our veins. Our bodies start, we start respirating more. And so you may want to encourage the child to either, charge up and down the stairs to burn off that energy, splash cold water on their face, or even try that progressive muscle relaxation exercise that we did before. Some students can definitely benefit from cognitive behavioral therapy. There's also tapping, which I'm not certified in it, but coaches often have. There's a technique where there's tapping, and I think you tap different parts of your body. There are workshops out there. I'm sure you could YouTube that as well to find out more about that. And then, of course, I think the last step might be medication, but if your child has severe anxiety, that might be warranted. And of course, you want to speak to a psychiatrist or psychologist about that. So I'm happy to take questions. Before I go, I do want to thank everybody for being here, and also just once again reiterate, my name's Dr. P, and you can always contact me at any time with any questions after this, although I'm going to open it up to questions in a second. My email address is info@crimsoncoaching.com. And if you found this helpful, I always appreciate a review on Google Reviews. And if you want to stay in touch and learn about other things that I'm doing, I do have a YouTube channel where I will be posting. I'm going to edit this. We're recording this right now, and I'll be posting this video there. I also have another couple of talks coming up in the next couple of weeks, and if you like my Facebook page, you'll find out about that. I'm also technically on Instagram, but not very active there, I'll admit. But my talk, I have a talk on Monday for those of you who have high school age children on college planning during and after Corona quarantine. That's being sponsored by the Center for Continuing Ed. And if you go on my Facebook page or also my website, you can find more about that on the classes and workshop page. And then next Thursday at the same time, if any of you have children who are taking AP US, World, or European history exams, I'm going to have a whole webinar. I used to be an AP US teacher and a classroom teacher and exam reader. Exam leader. I used to grade thousands of those exams every May. So I'm going to be giving parents some tips, and that's sponsored by the Pearl River Public Library. So that's really all I have for tonight. I'd love to hear from you and just hear about any questions you might have, or even just share any tips that you've gotten on dealing with your own child's anxiety. So you can feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in there. Or you could put it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable doing that. So I hear someone there. I don't know if the 914-271-8132 number wants to speak, but feel free if you do. Or maybe it's the 845 number. No questions in the chat. Oh, here's one. Chat. Let's see. Oh, yeah. It's funny. So I think that some kids who are introverts, and we didn't talk so much about introverts versus extroverts, but I think introverts are really happy with this whole social distancing thing because they're not going to have to, they don't have to interact with anybody, right? And that's kind of an introvert's dream. I am happy, I have to say, just because I feel so bad for kids who are severe introverts, that school is actually so not geared for them that it's actually got to be exhausting to be an introvert and be at school. But yeah, I do think that um, the transition may be difficult, but it's great, Rebecca, that you're actually aware that that might be difficult, and just kind of being more aware of that, and coming back and maybe even reviewing this webinar may be helpful for your child. Oops. Any other questions?
Yeah. This is Susan.
Sure.
What would you recommend for starting a conversation with your child who may not be willing to admit that they're either stressed or procrastinating or could use some help with time management? What would you recommend to kind of help them with this without it turning into World War III? Because of course they want to be independent as teens.
Right. And how old is the child?
16.
So, okay, so 16. Yeah, that is. Well, I think perhaps just a really open-ended question, like, how are you doing? Um, might be a way to broach that. I think going from there, asking more and more narrow questions like, do you feel anxious? And if you think that that might be too open-ended or too kind of amorphous, asking about any one of those more do you feel irritable? Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you restless? Or I at dinner, like, say if somebody's like, bit fidgeting like this, oh, you seem restless. um that might be. And then, I mean, the other thing might be just, I don't know, how would your child feel about even watching some of this?
Are you going to be sending the recording out, I hope?
um you know what, I can send the link to it. Yeah, I don't want to send the actual recording because it will
Right.
destroy your inbox, but sure. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get on with the video, so I'm just phone.
Yeah, that's okay. And I think, the key is that what I've seen in just working with so many kids who are anxious is that they don't like being anxious. I mean, they're suffering, right? And it I think that they do want a lifeline out and they just don't often know how to get there. Um, and so, with kids who, and I grant you that it is probably a lot, not probably, it is a lot easier for me to come in and help a kid than a parent, right? Because the last person a kid wants help from is their parent. But the kids do seem to be pretty receptive. I mean, I've had kids who struggle with anxiety who I've had do journaling, positive affirmations to themselves, do these breathing exercises, and they say that it helps them. So, and they're 16 too. So it's not impossible.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments or questions? All right. Well, it doesn't seem like anybody is has any burning questions, but again, I want you to invite, like, if you think of something right after we end this call, I'm totally happy to answer a question. If you want to email me, or if you go to my website, which is right on the screen right there, you can just click contact and you can email me. I'm happy to answer the question. And um, you know P.S. Parents can do a lot of, adults can do a lot of these things too. I know that this is a super stressful time for so many people. And so I really recommend, almost making it like a family affair. And one of the most effective strategies is modeling. And when students see parents doing it, when kids see their parents doing it, they know that it's important. And they might not let it on, especially if they're teenagers, but they will begin to say, oh, okay, yeah, maybe. But if we're the ones who of course are always distracted and say on our phone and blah 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 all the time, then they're of course gonna children learn what they live, right? Just like the poem. All right. Well, I want to just thank the library again and Susie Zavarella for hosting me, and thank all of you for joining in. It's been a real pleasure, and I wish you a lot of less anxious days ahead.